les États-Unis. Avant toute chose, je voudrais vous préciser que ce webinaire va être enregistré et donc disponible, ainsi que la présentation par la suite. Donc, deux marchés prioritaires pour le secteur de l'habillement, que sont le Royaume-Uni et les USA. Tout d'abord, nous traiterons du Royaume-Uni, qui est le 7e client de la France pour le secteur de l'habillement. Nous aurons le plaisir pour cette présentation d'accueillir le groupe Hive, qui est en charge de tous les salons retail et du fashion au UK, et notamment du salon Scoop et du salon Pure. Pour faire cette présentation, nous avons le plaisir d'accueillir Robert Sapwell, qui est European Development Director, UK Retail et Fashion Division, ainsi que Nihat Berktas, European Development Manager, responsable en charge de la France et UK Retail Fashion Division. Donc, nous sommes ravis de les accueillir et je vais leur laisser la parole dans quelques instants. Suite à cette présentation, nous traiterons également d'un autre marché important qui est le 6e client de la France, les États-Unis. Pour cette autre présentation, nous accueillerons le groupe Informa, notamment des organisateurs de poterie et de project, et de nombreux salons sur les États-Unis. Je vous invite, à bien éteindre vos micros si vous n'intervenez pas, pour le confort de tous. Merci beaucoup. Donc, pour cette seconde présentation, nous accueillerons Edwina Kulego, qui est Vice President International and Men's Fashion pour Informa Market, et Amy Giaraputo, qui est International Business Development Manager. Je profite d'avoir la parole pour vous rappeler que ces différentes opérations, notamment les opérations Pure et Scoop, qui auront lieu au premier semestre 2022, sont soutenues par des chèques Relance Export, qu'il faut impérativement faire la demande de ces chèques avant le 15 décembre 2022, et que pour les salons, notamment coterie aux États-Unis, il y a un soutien par le défi. Voilà, je vais désormais laisser la parole à nos deux premiers intervenants, Robert et Nihat. À vous. Robert, your mic is off.
Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me today. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, look, what I'm going to do is take you through probably around about 8 or 9 slides, just talking about the UK market and the UK fashion market and where we stand at the moment in the current kind of situation. And then Nihat will take you through a bit more information around our shows. So my name's Robert Sapwell. I'm European Development Director at Hive UK. So I'm responsible for European revenue across all of the Hive portfolio. So we'll make a start, if that's okay, if we go to slide 1. I'm not really in control of it, so I don't know who's controlling the okay. So yeah, just a little bit. I mean, this is very simple about what we do. We cater for retail, so that's across fashion, the biggest one, gift and home, which can incorporate anything that isn't fashion, and then also gardening as well. Our team works very much on dealing with trade associations, with embassies, with agents, with intelligence companies, and obviously, the exhibitors themselves. So look, that's kind of really what we do overall. But I mean, if we can get to the retail market slides, that would be brilliant. So look, I mean, the retail market itself, if we incorporate everything, is 422 billion. So it's one of the largest markets in Europe, and it contributes 5% of our GDP. So it's the largest employer in the UK outside of the civil service and the National Health Service. So, 29% of the UK market, 29% of its sales are done online, and that's up basically from 18% pre-COVID. So we're still seeing very much a kind of an online trend in terms of spend, which is probably common throughout most of Europe. But I mean, look, just over 500,000 retail businesses are in the UK, and they're more and more of them, even the independent stores, are becoming omnichannel. So they're not just bricks and mortar stores anymore. They're highly focused on omnichannel with an online presence. And a lot of independent shops now, particularly in the cities, are becoming more privy to setting up their shop on mobile as well. But I think what's the most interesting statistic on this is that UK retail sales grew 4.8% last year, and that's despite being locked down for 4 months. But of course, that you've seen that also that online percentage go up by 11%. So that's been the effect. If we can move on to the next slide, that'd be brilliant. And when we can look, so when we compare to pre-COVID, we've seen a growth of almost 10% in retail sales since 2019. So despite being locked down for 9 to 10 months, what this 10% demonstrates is the UK being one of the most resilient markets in Europe. So that's in terms of consumer spend. So we didn't stop spending during the pandemic, it just changed and turned on its head a tad. But look, where we are now, right now, is we can't ignore the kind of the cost of living impacts we're seeing this year. And I think inflation in the UK is probably one of the highest in Europe, if not the highest, certainly out of the kind of the bigger, larger economic European countries. So we're seeing a rise in interest rates, we're seeing a rise in cost, but UK retail is still due to grow overall, okay? And in spite of a lot of challenges, consumers are still spending. So the retail market is as buoyant as it possibly can be at the moment, which means our shows are buoyant. But there are challenges. So I think what I'm going to do next is show you kind of how consumer spend is broken down. So if we can go on to the next slide. So you look at these, this is everything broken down by sector. And what we've done here is compare April 22 to August 22. And this is kind of coming into that kind of mini crisis we had with our kind of new government in September. So we're seeing a slight decrease, right, of footwear and clothing sales between April and August. And the growth in food is kind of obvious, but it's a slight decrease. And overall sales to the kind of sector remain really, really strong. But this just gives you the most up-to-date, very honest view of where we're at, kind of the latest, because obviously the statistics for the next quarter will be out at the end of this year. But this gives you a very honest look of what the UK is spending on. And you can see that we're seeing a very slight decrease on clothing and a very slight decrease on footwear. I mean, it's just very, very honest. But I think it's holding very, very steady and you know, relatively flat at the moment. And I think now with the golden quarter coming in and with perhaps the external things happening in terms of our overall economy calming down a tad, we're in for, you know, we had record Black Friday sales across a lot of the key fashion retailers, like Primark and Next, for example, 4 days ago, 4 or 5 days ago. So we think we're going to be in quite a good place as we head into 2023 and 2024. So if we could move to the next one, that would be lovely. So look, we've got to bear in mind that energy prices are obviously increasing. People have less disposable income. And this bit of research involved around 5,000 consumers on their current kind of spending habits. And this is again, very, very honest, and hopefully just as transparent for you guys so you can see. I mean, there's nothing hugely kind of surprising here. But what is key is that they're buying a lot more in store, which is heartening because, you know, basket sizes generally are going to be higher via than online. So if 25% of respondents claim that they will shop more in store, this means a greater volume of footfall returning to the UK high streets and to independent stores, which is kind of our key visitor audience, right, across our fashion trade shows. But what is also increasing is impulse spends as well. So that's better, certainly for fashion, and certainly for retail overall. If you take out fuel and food, like the essentials, impulse spends are obviously very, very important. But look, what is key in fashion is that consumers are looking to save money on food and everyday items like FMCG product, right? So where they're not looking to save money is on more premium and high-end home and fashion. So if it's high quality product and the willingness is there to spend more, and they will spend more for well-made products with a story, and that still persists. But what we're also seeing is the difference between the under 35s, as in Gen Z, and over 35, so kind of more millennial age, and younger people are willing to pay more on well-made products and products with a story. And that's kind of key. So there is a clear difference here between the cost of living crisis on the bare essentials such as fuel and food, and that's where consumers are revising and altering their mindset in terms of their pricing. But then in terms of clothing, and bearing in mind we're about to go through the first Christmas period and festive period that's been open for the last 2 years. Consumers are buying more on clothes, on product that they're going to wear going out, for more functions, Christmas parties. Everything now is more focused on treating themselves and kind of cutting back on what they pay for their mustard, for example, they will cut back on. But in terms of what they spend in terms of a treat and more kind of the impulse and the want to consume, is very much they're spending more on that quality product, which bodes well for fashion as a whole. So it's all reassuring, but this gives you a good idea of how people in the UK are affected by the cost of living and what they're doing in terms of their spending habits and what they're changing. So that's quite reassuring, to be fair. If we can move to the next slide, that would be amazing. So look, when you take that all into account in terms of the UK retail, despite all of the challenges, shorter term and longer term,
Your mic is off.
sorry, it's still, I'm going to just say it's still due to grow by 2%. So overall UK retail, despite all of the challenges this year, is still due to increase. So that just kind of summarizes everything in terms of the UK retail market. But I'm going to go into now a little bit more in depth into fashion, if that's okay. So look, 2020 and 2021, it's fair to say that clothing and fashion had a particularly turbulent time globally, and the UK was certainly no exception, okay? But what we've seen from last year is a huge march forward on that spend. So analysts 6 months ago were predicting in the UK a return of fashion consumer spend to the 2019 levels, not happening until the end of 2023. But what's actually happened is quite the opposite, which is good. So again, overall spend across the whole of the retail market is 2%. In fashion, and fashion alone, it's 6%. So again, taking into account the cost of living, the fuel crisis, this is very encouraging. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, but it is encouraging. And I think that's also encouraging when you're a brand looking to come and open up trade in the UK to our trade shows. And the UK footwear and clothing market is clearly resilient, and it's ahead of where a lot of analysts expected it to be, which is good. And as you can see from this slide, you know, fashion's experiencing kind of a 10% 2-year growth in clothing in the UK and almost 12% from 2012. So it's a good place to be despite all of the challenges. And that's what we've got to remember here, that the fashion market in the UK is still due to grow by 6% when we take into account all of the kind of the more challenging and negative things that has happened with our economy, short term and longer term, across the year of 2022. So if we can go to the next slide, that'd be lovely. So look, what you've got here is kind of an overview of the fashion market share breakdown in the UK. So unsurprisingly, the biggest proportion is UK women's wear. You know, females spend over 20 billion annually on clothing in the UK. But you can see that breakdown there for you, and I'm sure Nihat and our partners in France will be able, we can share this information. I mean, it's a lot, it's very stat heavy, but it is overly positive, and it's just interesting if you're in this market, what the actual UK consumers are spending their money on. But it won't be particularly surprising. I think, if anything, you know, children's clothing in terms of market share is very big. You know, so they're not surprising, but it's good to see. So if we can move to the next slide, that'd be lovely. So look, this is quite stat heavy, but look, if you break it down, if you look at year-on-year growth from January 21 to 22, the major consumer growth categories are found in footwear and they're found in clothing. So we've incorporated here like health and beauty, DIY, homewares, etc. And what I was saying earlier across the UK rings true. You can see 3.2% down in terms of food spend, right? So they're cutting back and reassessing what they spend, where they spend their essential FMCG needs. But then you look at footwear and clothing, it's over 50% year-on-year growth. So it rings true very much that people in the UK are treating themselves and they are reassessing what they spend on essentials. That's what the current trend is. And I think that will be the trend that continues as we head into 2023 as well. But look, these numbers are updated every quarter. So what we're seeing is positive, and that's positive for the fashion market in the UK, and it's a positive story overall. So if you think 2% UK, 6% fashion in 2022, despite the challenges, it's actually reading quite well when it comes to your core markets, which are footwear and clothing and fashion. So if we can move to the next slide, that'd be lovely. So look, you know, with what's interesting, our main kind of audience is independent boutiques and larger clothing retailers, those are the buyers that come to Pure, okay, and they come to Scoop and they come to our fashion shows. But I think what's really interesting is how much medium and independent retailers make up a high proportion of the UK retail landscape. You know, it was the larger retailers that were affected by COVID, and the independent stores on a village or town high street did very, very well. Why? Because consumers felt more confident going into these local stores and not going into perhaps the city centres or the out of town retail parks where there were going to be more people because of the effects of COVID. So a number of these larger retailers were, you know, forced to close. So the bigger stores were reassessing their kind of the property that they owned or leased, and it didn't affect the smaller clothing retailers as much. But I think what's encouraging is how the larger retailers have bounced back, and we've seen, you know, an increase in both sales in the large retailers, but it hasn't detracted from what's happening with the smaller retailers too. So I think the key takeaway from this slide, and again, it's very stat heavy, is how well independents are performing. Because remember, that's our core audience and our bread and butter audience of our fashion trade shows in the UK. So the last slide, I think this will be the last one, and I haven't mentioned it as yet. If we can move to the next one, if that's okay. So that's just an overall, you know, slide just to sum up where we are. So we've seen a resurgence in UK fashion as consumers invest in their wardrobes. They are treating themselves. Consumers are paying the full price. They're going on holiday again, and they're going to more weddings and social events. All quite common sense, right? But that has all of those things have a positive effect on fashion retail in the UK. And the final thing that I haven't mentioned, and this is the last slide, and I thought I'd leave it till last, is you're probably going to ask where we are, what we are doing to address Brexit, right? Because it's confusing. It is. So what we decided to do is this Brexit was forgotten about during COVID, pretty much. And that's obviously with a lot of our export brands that are interested in coming to the UK, this is proving a challenge, particularly if they've never done it before. I think someone keeps muting me. I don't know why. But okay, someone's kind of muting me, so I'm not in control of this. But look, where we're at with Brexit, we've actually are going to be putting lots of content on our website. We're going to be putting lots of interviews on our website with this person, a lady called Leslie Batchelor. So she runs a agency specifically to help exporters looking to come into the UK. So we've interviewed her for the Scoop website. We've interviewed her for the Pure website. She is writing a step-by-step guide on if you were to come into the UK, how you could mitigate all of the information you would need to come into the UK, right from, you know, getting goods to the exhibition, the regulations and standards to follow, the packaging since leaving the EU, rules of origin, changes since leaving the EU that's impacted trade. All of this she covers in a guide that she is writing. That's going to be available imminently on our Pure and Scoop websites to download. All of the correct links are there, and it's split into 5 key areas of what you need to cover. And then we're also interviewing her as well. The best of all is she's our partner now, and she offers a consultancy service and advice, and an advice line, like a hotline. You can pick up the phone or email her and her team, and they'll help guide you through what you need to do, depending on the gaps that you have. So even though this isn't going to solve the problem of Brexit, what it is going to do is give anyone new into the UK market a real key step-by-step guide on what to do. So we hope it helps. And Nihat and our partners over in France will let you guys know when this goes live, because she has got 40 years experience around exporting into the UK and trading with the UK from Europe. So we hope it helps, because I can appreciate that governmental websites in the UK are not the easiest to navigate. So we're trying to break it down to bite-sized chunks for everybody. So that really concludes it. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sure this presentation will be shared, and if there are any questions, I'll try and answer them. If not, I'll try and find out the answers. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Je vais prendre la main et je vais continuer en français. I'm going to continue in French, if you don't mind, Rob. I know. So, as je suis conscient du temps, donc je vais faire assez rapidement. Donc, je travaille chez Hive depuis plus de 7 ans et je suis en charge de nos shows retail et fashion au Royaume-Uni pour la France, responsable européen en charge pour la France. Nous avons les salons Pure Londres, salon leader du fashion au Royaume-Uni, et Scoop et Irlande. Il ne faut pas oublier le marché irlandais parce qu'ils n'ont pas de salon, donc ils viennent dans nos salons. Et Scoop, qui est notre salon plus premium pour les marques un peu plus pour designers. Pour aller plus vite, je vais faire une présentation un peu plus rapide parce qu'on avait déjà présenté de toute façon Scoop. Pure Londres se divise, c'est le plus grand salon au Royaume-Uni, attire chaque saison plus de 10 000 acheteurs. Nous avons fait un comeback au mois de juillet dernier et nous allons refaire une édition au mois de février, aux dates traditionnelles du 12 au 14 février avec différents secteurs. Donc 40% de nos retailers, de nos commerces de détail viennent uniquement à Pure Londres, et ils ont 79% de ces visiteurs ont une responsabilité pour pouvoir placer des commandes directement avec les marques. On a différents secteurs du salon que je vais balayer rapidement. Donc prêt-à-porter, classique et moderne. On édite en fonction des différentes marques et des collections qu'on a. On analyse et on place à côté des marques qui correspondent le plus pour avoir la meilleure expérience sur le salon. Donc à l'entrée du salon, nous avons le secteur premium, women's wear, avec des prix qui sont un petit peu peut-être au-delà de 100 pounds, 100 pounds wholesale, prix B2B. Nous avons le secteur Gen Z qui se trouve dans des prix inférieurs à 50 pounds parce que ça répond à la dynamique du marché, à la démographie du marché correspondant aux jeunes générations qui ont un budget un peu plus faible que les travailleurs. Nous avons aussi le nouveau secteur du Pure Body, où on sent un engouement, puisque avec la pandémie et les problématiques concernant les activités sportives, c'est celles qu'on pouvait faire uniquement pendant la pandémie. Ces marques se sont développées pendant cette période-là, et les marques même traditionnelles de prêt-à-porter féminin ont lancé des lignes dans le secteur de l'athléisure, donc du sport et donc du body. Donc, on a un engouement aussi pour ce secteur-là. Avant la pandémie, on était conscient des différentes politiques que nous réalisons avec les Nations Unies et concernant tout ce qui est les problématiques de plastique. Donc, on avait lancé la campagne Power of One, unique dans nos salons. Et bien entendu, avec le secteur du prêt-à-porter durable, donc purely sustainable, où il y a un engouement où certains retailers nous demandent ça. Donc, il y a un développement qui va être fait sur les prochaines années et on va voir de plus en plus de marques dans un secteur qui sera à l'entrée de ce salon pour la prochaine édition. Nous avons aussi incorporé un salon qui ne faisait pas partie de notre groupe, donc qui fait désormais partie de notre groupe, qui peut correspondre aussi aux marques alternatives, celles qu'on trouve beaucoup à Berlin ou dans l'Est de Londres, mais on sait qu'aussi il y a des marques aussi en France qui peuvent prendre leur place sur ce marché qui est très fort en fait. Voilà un petit peu pour les secteurs principaux pour le prêt-à-porter féminin. Comment on fait la promotion? Ben, au Royaume-Uni, nous utilisons beaucoup l'outil digital. Donc, beaucoup de nos activités de promotion se passent en ligne. Donc, je vais vous passer les détails, vous pourrez lire, parce que cette présentation sera partagée. Et nous vous expliquerons, bien entendu, si vous nous sollicitez, on vous donnera plus ample détails. Voici nos visiteurs, un petit peu. Et là, je vais m'arrêter à ce que Rob nous a dit concernant la hausse de quasiment 75% de la performance des indépendants. Et effectivement, ces indépendants correspondent à un volume de 66% de nos visiteurs. Et ils ont bien performé pendant la pandémie parce que aussi, ce que Rob ne nous a pas signalé, c'est que les personnes qui travaillent à Londres n'habitent plus forcément à Londres. Ils habitent à l'extérieur de Londres. Du coup, ces zones et ces petites villes et ces moyennes villes bénéficient de salaires des grandes villes, là où les loyers sont un petit peu moins chers. Et donc, obligatoirement, ces travailleurs vont dépenser l'argent, leur salaire, là où ils habitent. Et donc, obligatoirement, les grands magasins de Londres n'en profitent pas forcément. Il faut qu'il y ait un renouvellement en fait de la High Street, ce qu'on appelle la High Street, dans les grandes villes actuellement, pour pouvoir réattirer un petit peu cette population. Voici des statistiques dont je vais passer rapidement. Vous pourrez voir un petit peu sur le Pur Londres, donc c'est le plus grand salon du Royaume-Uni. Et ce qui fait notre différence par rapport peut-être à d'autres salons aussi internationaux, c'est les tendances qu'on diffuse pour attirer un petit peu les acheteurs, pour qu'ils voient, et aussi les retailers acheteurs, et aussi les marques pour leur donner un petit peu qu'est-ce qui va se passer sur la prochaine saison. Donc, nous, on a investi massivement là-dessus et on travaille avec des partenaires. Et d'ailleurs, notre partenaire sur le marché est un forecaster de tendance français. Donc, voilà, ça, c'est un plus pour la France aussi. Je voulais aussi parler rapidement, on avait déjà précédemment fait sur d'autres webinaires le Scoop. C'est un salon un petit peu premium qui va se passer fin janvier, à la Saatchi Gallery. Donc après 2 ans de salon dans différents emplacements à Londres, nous revenons à la Saatchi Gallery dans l'ouest de Londres, à sa source, on va dire. Et on a déjà beaucoup d'engouement aussi pour le prêt-à-porter féminin, où la curatrice du salon aide les marques un petit peu au niveau du placement à côté d'autres marques qui font déjà leur apparition depuis plusieurs années. Et c'est pour ça qu'ils ont aussi un visitorat qui est plus spécifique, dédié plus aux boutiques et aux department stores. Donc, ce salon se définit plus comme un salon qui correspond comme un department store, si on peut y comparer. Voilà pour l'ensemble pour les salons. I'm going to switch back in English. So we thank you very much for today and for the French Federation. And if you do have any questions, est-ce que vous avez des questions?
Merci Rob, merci Nihat. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Effectivement, le marché anglo-saxon est un marché qui a été freiné donc par le Brexit, mais on le voit, hein, qui a repris ses lettres de noblesse, qui a su se réinventer avec un certain nombre de concept stores, de nouveaux concept stores et autres, et qui, pour vous situer, effectivement, connaît une progression de 28% sur les 6 premiers mois de l'année dans le secteur de l'habillement. Donc, on reconnaît très volontiers un certain dynamisme à ce pays, et au salon Scoop et Cure. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Sinon, on les prendra à la fin de toutes les interventions. Également, je tenais à vous signaler que sur des questions Brexit, le groupe Hive va mettre à disposition prochainement un guide. Donc, n'hésitez pas, le moment venu, à nous, si vous avez des problèmes, à nous solliciter de façon à ce qu'on vous partage ce guide. Nous vous rappelons que les inscriptions pour les différents salons, que ce soit les salons anglais ou les salons dont on va parler juste après. Les inscriptions sont en cours actuellement. N'hésitez pas à nous solliciter pour avoir plus d'informations ou être mis en relation et autres. Tiffany Fang est en charge du marché anglais, donc tfang@pretaporter.com. On peut lever la main ou il faut écrire la question. Ah, donc il y a des
Tu as des
questions.
questions en conversation?
Absolument. Pourriez-vous rappeler la date de disponibilité du guide?
Je vais répondre à la question, si tu me permets, Anne-Laure. Ça sera disponible dans les prochains jours, donc c'est vraiment très récent. Et là, il y aura donc une ligne, ce qu'on appelle une hotline, où l'équipe de Leslie, qui sera une équipe de ce qu'on appelle au Royaume-Uni, je pense que certains seront déjà à même de comprendre ça, de seconde langue. Donc, c'est un petit peu difficile de parfois, avec l'accent, de discuter avec des Britanniques, mais ce sera une équipe européenne donc qui va répondre aux questions qui sont spécialisées concernant à toutes ces questions concernant le Brexit. Le guide sera disponible via notre site web de Scoop et de Pure, et la ligne, nous communiquerons la ligne téléphonique où vous pourrez directement les contacter parce qu'ils travaillent pour nous avec un service de consultanat. C'est un investissement encore du groupe Hive. Et c'est totalement gratuit. Voilà, pour les marques.
Autre question, pourquoi Scoop et Pure ne restent-ils pas aux mêmes dates?
D'accord. Alors, les dates de Scoop, les dates de Pure sont les dates originales de Pure London, donc là, il n'y a pas de changement. Donc, il faut faire déjà une enquête auprès des retailers et des marques pour pouvoir changer des dates. La date de Pure a toujours été dans ces dates-là, qui correspond à la période d'achat pour Pure London. Scoop est un salon, avec des marques de designers, de marques contemporains. Ils ont toujours eu leur date en fait au mois de janvier et donc ils reviennent à leur source pour fin janvier. Et il y avait un objectif de ne pas faire un clash avec des différents salons aussi. Donc, nous connaissons la dynamique que ça a créé pendant le dernier salon. Ça a été soulevé aussi par la fédération. Et c'est vrai que ça a créé un certain dynamisme d'avoir directement les deux salons en même temps, au même endroit. Peut-être dans le futur, on aura peut-être aussi en même temps. Pour l'instant, pour cette prochaine édition, les dates sont fin janvier pour Scoop et début février pour Pure London. Malheureusement, parfois, tout n'est pas idéal.
Nous avons deux dernières questions. Une première, une question concernant le comportement des acheteurs. Une marque nous indique qu'elle a constaté sur les salons parisiens que les acheteurs venaient, mais qu'ils finalement ils continuaient d'acheter uniquement les marques qu'ils les connaissaient déjà. Donc, est-ce que les acheteurs UK s'aventuraient à acheter de nouvelles marques?
On va poser la question peut-être à Rob. On va poser en anglais. Rob, I will ask you a question about the habits of the buyers coming to the show. And they tend to buy from the same brands and not from the new brands. It's a pattern that they've seen doing a show in France. Who's next? Not to give a name, but it's what they've seen. Is it the same in the UK?
Well, look, the UK buyer, whether it's fashion or gift and home or gardening, whatever it may be, is very disconcerting, right? So in my 12 years experience, they will look for new brands and may not order the first show. So I say to every single brand new company that's coming to the UK for the first time and looking at exporting to the UK, in show one, if you take into account the cost that it is to show up the show, all of your expenses, etc., if you can make back and break even in terms of your initial outlay in show one, you've done extremely well. That's managing expectation, okay? Breaking even is the expectation, and you've done very, very well for show one. So if you've outlaid £7,000 across everything, and you make that £7,000 back in orders taken across the 3 days of Scoop or Pure, then that's a very, very good result. But a UK buyer may take a risk and order a little from you to start with, or they may wait to see you again for spring, summer, then order. then reorder again for autumn, winter 24, etc. But it needs to be an 18-month commitment, a 3-show plan. We're not going to ask you to commit to 3 shows, but you need to have it in your mind that it takes 18 months to crack the UK market. And that's the experience. And my own personal view, if you break even in your first show and you find a UK agent that's going to represent you, then you've got the after sale support already there. That's quite common. So that would be, if you could go back to France with a UK agent, good contact that you could speak to and confirm to work with, who will represent your brand in the UK day to day, and you break even in terms of physical orders taken at the show, then that is a very, very, very good first show, because it's all about the after sales, right? So that would be my kind of takeaway. If I was coming to the UK for the first time and stepping into this market for the first time and doing our show for the first time, that would be deemed the kind of what you'd want to come away with. Anything above that would be a massive, massive bonus. So I hope that's made sense.
Just to add something about it. Just to add something about it. Actually, to have a successful first show as well, you need to prepare the show and you need to start contacting the retailers that you are interested in. I'm going to make it short. If someone wants to obviously speak to Tiffany and I can have a conversation how to prepare the best show and contacting the retailers, because like that you will have to break the ice, and the retailer can be a little bit shy in the first show, not knowing these new brands. But if you already contact them beforehand, they will recognize you, and therefore after that it's going to be easier at the show to already have a second conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Nihat, for these great presentations. Now we are going to speak about the 6th customer of France in our fashion industry, which is the USA. So we are very glad to welcome for this Edwina Culego, who is a Vice President International Men's Fashion of Informa Market. Edwina, first of all, thank you very much for waking up so early, because there is a big